welcome to another episode of the Love Your Life Show. I have a great one for you today. I am your host, Susie Pettit, and I come on every week bringing you tips and tools to help you learn how to live your best life. And today's guest is someone I'm so excited to introduce you to. It's Dr. Zoe Shaw. She is a licensed psychotherapist, life and relationship coach. She's a podcast host, and she is the author of a wonderful book titled Stronger in the Difficult Places. Dr. Zoe specializes in helping women heal from complex shame and codependency so they can experience more freedom, healthier relationships, and a stronger relationship with themselves. Sounds good, right? So let's be honest. Many of us need this conversation. If you've ever felt weighed down by guilt or thought to yourself, I'm being too selfish, or you've noticed yourself always taking care of other people at the expense of yourself, raising my hand to all those things, this episode is for you. We dive into how shame shows up in life, specifically in midlife, what codependency really looks like, and most importantly, how to begin to break free from these patterns. So grab your cup of water or tea, take a deep breath, and let's dig into this amazing, wonderful Dr. Zoe Shaw. And welcome to the Love Your Life Show, Dr. Zoe Shaw. I'm so glad to have you here. Thank you for taking your time to come today.
Thank you, Susie, for having me on. I'm so thrilled to be on here, and I was so thrilled to connect with you on Instagram because we kind of share the same audience.
We sure do. We share the same
Yeah.
audience, and we share, as we were just talking before we came on, we share a lot of the same shame background.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really been there, done that, are still doing it, and I'm so glad to have you on. And I guess let's start there with your podcast, which I'm a big fan of, and Stronger in the Difficult Places, which is also the name of your book, which we will discuss. But you say that you help listeners with their most difficult relationships, one of which might be the one with themselves,
Yes.
and how, like, your tagline of we're not fixing them, we're fixing you, and that changes everything. Can you tell us a little more about what you mean by that?
Oh, yes, I will. And I'm so thrilled that you have me on to talk about shame because shame is one of those things that nobody really wants to talk about. And I
Right.
feel like in some ways I'm like, this grim reaper. So I try to bring hope and some joy to the concept of shame because in talking about it, we get to experience so much freedom.
Mhm.
So the title of my book is Stronger in the Difficult Places. The title of my podcast is that as well. And the reason why I titled it that, actually, my publishers decided on the title of the book. I wanted to title my book Reckon with Her. But the reason why I
Ooh.
titled my podcast that is because we women, especially, but really everyone, I just had a male text me and tell me how meaningful this. He said, I know I'm not your target audience, but this book I'm literally has brought me to tears. We go through, all of us have something in our life that we're struggling with. And me being a therapist for over a couple of decades, I've been a therapist to celebrities and to people who seem like their lives are perfect,
Mhm.
to everyday normal people. And every single one of us, of them, is struggling with something.
Mhm.
And usually that something is attached to shame, deeply attached to shame.
Mhm.
And it's great to be strong and it's great to try to be strong. But what I love is the concept that our difficult places are actually the places where our power lies. And the reason why is because when we are able to overcome those difficulties, and everybody has a different one, we are able to not just find our own personal freedom, but we can help other people find their personal freedom.
Mhm.
And my accountant of all people sat with me one day when I was in his office and he was asking me how I was and I asked him, how he was doing. And he said, Zoe, he said, it's amazing that a cracked cup can still hold water. And for some reason that was so profound to me
Mhm.
because it reminds us the fact that just because we're broken, sometimes. Just because we're cracked sometimes doesn't mean we aren't still functional. Doesn't mean we can't do all the things that we were put on this earth here to do. So that was a long way of saying that's why I named the book and the podcast Stronger in the Difficult Places. And yes, the other thing is that I am a relationship specialist. I am a codependency and shame specialist. But what I found is that most people coming to me are trying to fix other people in their lives. And most people in their relationships are trying to fix the other person, right? And what I know is that when we work instead on the most important relationship we have in this world, and that is the one with ourselves, and it's the most important because it sets the lens and the tone for every single relationship, even our relationship with God, it
Mm.
sets the tone. And so when we're able to focus on healing ourselves, then the ripple effect is that everything else, right, changes.
Woohoo! I'm like, preach it. Yes. Yes, to all of that. And I want to sort of underline the two pieces there that have helped me in my relationships, but also with
Yeah.
shame. What you spoke of is what your accountant said. That's so funny that, broken glasses still hold water.
Right, a cracked cup, yeah, can still
Yeah, a
hold
cracked
water.
cup. Thank you. You're like, no, Susie, that's not.
Not if they're totally
Yeah,
shattered, but yes, a
about what
cracked
he
cup.
said. Exactly. Like broken glasses don't, but when we have these errors, or even that,
Yes.
that that mistakes happen, sort of this,
Mhm.
I think that's one of the challenges in when we are not working on our relationship with ourselves. We're trying to be so perfect and to hold everything
Right.
together and have
Yeah.
no cracks in our glasses and no mess-ups when we're repeating things on podcasts or whatever. And when we can just be like, oh yeah, people make mistakes,
Yep.
that can be a nice little balm to shame. Also, what you spoke to, and I really appreciate with your work with celebrities and your work with just the average person, is
Yeah.
that humans struggle. Like, that's something I'm
Yes,
often saying. Like, all humans have something. Like,
we do.
even in the penthouse, like those,
Yes.
there
Even in
have
the White
people
House.
with no running water. Like, it's like we all have
Yeah.
these experiences, and I think for me, that's another area where I would work to bring shame to myself. Would be like, well, Susie, you haven't good enough. Like, who are you to
Mm,
feel, XYZ? But it's like, no, this is just your thing right now. Like, yes, you
right.
do have running water and you do live in a nice place and you can still feel crap. Like, it's
All the
okay.
things. All the things. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like, so can you, speaking of this shame, um, and complex, you talk about complex shame and healing from complex shame. Can you tell us a little more about what that, like, what even is complex shame?
Yes. And a lot of people don't know what it is because it's a term that I termed.
It's
I
beautiful.
coined it.
Yeah.
And so first I want to explain to the person listening out there the difference between guilt and shame. And a lot of
Yeah.
people
Thank you.
might know it, but for those of you who don't, guilt is an emotional state. It's a feeling that tells yourself, because all feelings send us messages. Guilt says, I've done something wrong. I've done something to break my moral code.
Mhm.
And so when we've done something to break our moral code, we feel something. Now, there is such a thing as invalid guilt. Mom guilt is one of those, and plenty of
Mhm.
us carry those around. And I'm not going to talk about the invalid guilt. It tells us the same thing. It's a lie. But valid guilt is healthy and it says I've broken my moral code. And so with guilt, what we can do is we can make a decision. We can go back and repair. We can't always fix things that we've done, but we can try, right? And then even if we can't fix it, we can make a decision. I will not do that again. So there's
Mhm.
something to do with guilt, which is why it's a healthy emotion. It moves us towards healthier behavior. Shame is
Mhm.
very different, and it is a mind state, emotional state that says, I am wrong.
Mhm.
I, as a person, am wrong. I am unworthy. And because it's so attached to our identity, there's nothing for us to do except hide. So,
Mhm.
shame in all its forms is an unhealthy emotion that forces us to hide and then creates a whole gamut of other issues. Distance, codependency, shame distances us in our relationships, it distances us in every aspect of our life, and it also causes codependency. So that's shame in all states.
Mhm.
Now, the thing about shame is that when you have what I call simple shame, the kind of shame that Brene Brown talks about. When you speak about it, when you finally become brave and you talk to somebody about your shame, and they actually give you external compassion when they tell you, it's okay, it wasn't your fault. We all feel that way, just like we were talking in the beginning. We all have something, right? And so you shouldn't be ashamed. When we get that experience, our shame actually dissipates
Mhm.
when we have simple shame. But when we have complex shame, it doesn't work. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people, especially when they're trying to alleviate shame and they apply the Brene Brown type
Right.
shame principle and their shame stays, then they feel even worse. And there's a couple of reasons. The first reason is that when someone gives you external compassion, because you have complex shame, your shame is not just tied to your identity, but it's kind of woven around a lot of other things. So you've had a shaming incident. You then tend to hide, right? Sabotage yourself. In that sabotaging, in that running from yourself and running from your shame, you've hurt yourself. You've done things. I'll give you an example. I have a client who is a smoker, and she has a lot of shame about smoking. She ended up having a heart attack. And she then kept smoking after the heart attack. And so she's had a history of hiding her smoking, hiding, her heart attack, hiding that she's continuing to smoke. And so when she does do something like tell someone, oh, I'm a smoker, I used to be a smoker, and someone's like, oh, addictions are hard, it's okay, I understand, my mom smokes or whatever, her shame does not go away.
Mhm.
Because in her mind, she says, oh, but you don't understand. My smoking
Mhm.
led to this. And also, I'm still doing it even after a heart attack. And all these things that she's attached to her shame, that's a
Mhm.
very simple explanation. And
Yeah.
so that external compassion does nothing. And to herself, she says, they don't understand. I don't deserve that compassion. And so her shame stays. Another reason why complex shame cannot still stays, I should say, when someone becomes vulnerable is because, and this happens a lot in marginalized societies and marginalized people, is that they get gaslit for their shame. So they finally become vulnerable enough to talk about it, and someone looks at them and says, that's not really happening. That didn't happen. Or you just looked at it the wrong way. And
Mhm.
they just tell them that their experience, their lived experience was not real. And so
Mhm.
their shame just spirals deeper.
Mhm.
Now, the other thing about people with complex shame is they also internalize as opposed to externalize their shame. And so they tend to be people who take on blame. And so that's the difference between simple shame and complex shame.
Mm. Oh, I'm like, there's so much there because I'm like, yeah, I feel like that's like everyone listening that
Mhm.
internalizing it and that I think you said like a stickiness to complex shame. Like it doesn't just, it's not like, oh, okay, I get it. Like addiction's
It
hard, but
collects all kinds of things as it continues to
yeah,
roll through your
it's
life. Yeah.
more of these like, oh no, I think what comes up for me and then people that I coach is this thought of like, no, but I'm different. Like even when you get that Brene Brown validation, it like there's this little like mean voice and no, they don't really understand. Like, no, I did it worse than they ever could have imagined, or
Yes,
like you're
exactly.
so broken that
Right.
like no, they just don't get it type place.
Yes. And I have a client that does that all the time and she wants to tell me how terrible she is and I acknowledge it and we talk about it. She's like, "Oh, no, 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 but you don't understand." And she wants to tell me more. Like she needs me to validate her lack of worth, which I absolutely refuse to do. But one of the things that needs to happen with complex shame that doesn't tend to happen, especially in the therapy room, is that especially if someone is victimized and they have complex shame as a result, our natural tendency as humans and even as therapists is to say, but it wasn't your fault. You couldn't
Hmm.
have done anything. And that does not work with complex shame because complex shame has that part that says, oh, I can think of a million things I could have done differently. It is my fault. And
Mm.
so what we have to do is actually work with that, which seems like we're victim blaming.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
have worked with clients and said, okay, let's look at your fault here. Let's
Mm-hmm.
look at the blame that you have towards yourself. Let's open it up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's acknowledge that you could have done something different. And then your brain's like, wait, 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 wait. Okay. And so then when we start to acknowledge the blame and what we could have done different, when we start to untangle all the things we've attached to our shame, and we're able to forgive ourselves for that, then shame begins to unravel.
Yes, and I thank you very much for that. And I I've done that dance and it's so delicate, but what it is there is like I always think of shame loves like darkness and secrecy and like it's like a
Does.
little, I feel like
Yeah.
shame feels like ooze to me, like it's like a black ooze when I feel it. And then I'm like
Yes.
shame just sits there in the darkness and is icky. And so when we can do what you just said and in a therapist's office is to sit and be like, okay, tell me about that, like how is your brain telling you this is your responsibility, and and lighten that up a little, like okay, maybe you did get have a heart attack because you're still smoking, and so now what, like is there a
Mhm.
place for us to be like back to square one, like we people are not perfect, so maybe that this is coming up, and I appreciate you too speaking to marginalized people and people who've had
Yeah.
some shame experiences, because this comes up in childhood, like someone will
Oh,
say,
absolutely.
well, my childhood was different, my dad was never around when he was there, and then we have a mom that's like, yes he was, he came home at
Yeah.
like right then, or another sibling is like, yeah he was
Right.
around enough for me, and it's like, okay, and he wasn't for me, but my whole experience has just been discounted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That happens so often. And the reality is that it's okay. And we have to get to that point where we recognize that two people can be in the same place and have two extremely opposite experiences. And we imagine that the person we're standing next to is having the very same experience that we are, and
Yeah.
they're not. And they can't because they're not you. Because
Mm-hmm.
we all see the world through a different lens, and we all see the world. We come to any point in existence with all of our needs,
Mm.
all of our experiences, right? And people have different needs. So if you don't need something in that moment and someone else does, they're going to have a feeling of lack and you
Mm.
won't. And so
Yeah.
we have to understand it. And that's where so much pain happens in relationships, that sense of disconnect. It's
Mm-hmm.
about, that shame and that feeling that they don't get me. And the story we create is because there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so
Yes.
good. It's like because I was just thinking of the sibling that's like, no, dad was home enough. And it's like
Yeah.
speaking to what you were saying with the needs, it's like, okay, maybe dad was home enough for that sibling's needs, but you had different needs, and we don't need to have
Yeah.
shame that you had different needs. He wasn't around
Right.
enough for your needs. And then what
Yeah.
I'm hearing in the relationship, I guess, is that conversation that you'll hear all the time where it's like, you know, um, I didn't feel heard, or I didn't, and then you have the spouse saying, but I did, I said this and I did this, and it's, and
Yeah.
so the intent is not dismissive, but the impact was dismissive, and to be able to have the maturity and the bandwidth in your system to be able to say to someone in a relationship, like, okay, I get, like I get, like I had the intent that I wanted to support you, and
Mhm.
but I can understand how you needed more in that moment, tell me more.
Indifferent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so hard. So how do you see, and we've been saying some of these, but I'm wondering if you have any other ideas of how do you see complex shame showing up like in midlife for people? If they're sort of like, yeah,
Oh.
this is me.
Yeah. So I love that you mentioned midlife because I'm going to start a little earlier.
Mhm.
But complex shame, as I said, creates codependency.
Mhm.
And when we are younger and we are codependent, we tend to, what I talk about in the book is we abandon ourselves in service of trying to please somebody else because we imagine if we can contort, because remember, shame makes us hide. So we're
Yeah.
hiding our real selves. And then when people love us in relationship, there's a part of us that doesn't feel loved because we know they
They
don't
don't
really
know
know
the
the
real
full us.
me.
We're
Yeah.
hiding, right? And so then we respond to them as if they don't love us, and it kind of creates this whole cycle. But what happens is we tend to get into these codependent relationships where we've abandoned ourselves to be in relationship with others.
Mhm.
And there's something that happens when midlife comes around, and part of it has to do with, our hormones changing that actually create, that nurturing aspect of the codependency, which helps us to kind of stay stuck in these difficult places. Um, those chemicals, those hormones begin to leave us, and all of a sudden it makes it harder for us to put up with things that we tended to put up with before.
Mhm.
And so a lot of strife tends to happen. It's why we have this crazy number of gray divorces
Yeah.
now, women in their 40s, 50s, 60s divorcing because we're no longer willing to put up with what we put up with before, but we put up with it because we were codependent and we were codependent because we had shame.
Yes.
And so what we need to do instead is to work on that complex shame.
Mm. That's so fascinating. And I definitely, I mean, that was my life,
Yeah.
in terms of I very much, and codependency, again, I guess just a quick definition here for people. I just like saying, like, in codependency, we're looking for the other person's, we're looking outside of ourselves to say that we're okay versus like sourcing it from the inside. So for me, if I was looking outside of myself, I would look to my dad. And if my dad thought I was okay, then I was okay. So I just was like that, little girl that did doing everything dad wanted me to do. And then I went
Right.
and married a man that was very much like my dad. So then as long as, and I was very fake to myself,
Hmm.
like to
Hmm.
him, he thought he was, what you see is what you get. But to me, I'm like, no, and so went through that for a bit until around 40, got a little sick of it. And I was a little earlier than the hormones because I had a life experience. One of my friends died, and that sometimes happens
That
too
will
in
do
midlife,
it. Yeah.
that you sort of
Yes.
get that. You're like, time is limited. What am I doing being this pretend
Right.
shell of myself? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
hold on, coming out and just being like, this isn't me. And the other person possibly being like, well, that's sort of a bait and switch because what's, I think it's interesting, and I love that people have the resource of your book and your podcast to hold themselves in that place without the shame, because that was very important for me to not beat past Susie up. Like, I was to just be
Right.
like,
Yeah.
I get it, girl. Like, you were following so much
Yes.
of what was programmed for you. If we were going to go back, yeah, maybe, there were different moments where you could have spoken up and been more authentic, but at the time, didn't freaking happen. Um,
It and part of healing from complex shame is understanding that all behavior makes sense in its context. All the
mm,
things that you did, all the choices that you made make complete sense
mm,
because of your temperament, your personality, your life experiences, everything that came together. And when we're able to accept that all of our behavior made sense in its context, then we're also able to do something that is crucial to overcoming complex shame. And I haven't even shared my personal story and all my shame story with you, but the crucial thing is that we have to give up all hope of a better past. And that's what I
um,
call forgiveness. And
uh,
I love that definition of forgiveness because it's not applied to it's a specific person. It's not even pointed at us. It's just saying forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past.
yeah.
And so even when I talk about the fact that, all of these things happen to you in midlife because of your complex shame and your codependency, and when you finally do what you should be doing, the strong thing and standing up, often the people we're in relationship with aren't able to tolerate it. And so it's not that you are now doing a bad thing and ending a relationship if that happens, or you're destroying or disrupting your relationship unnecessarily. It's just the reality of your growth towards health. It's sometimes hard for a relationship to hold that if the relationship has been dysfunctional for such a long time.
Hmm. Yeah, to not get into that defensive pattern. I very much
Yeah.
hear that. Yeah, so tell us your story, Doctor. Sorry, I totally skipped right in. I'm like, listeners, get to the good. This woman is
Yeah, it
crazy.
is okay. And, in many ways, my story, it doesn't matter because what matters is the concept of complex shame. But I share my story so that people understand the journey that I've been through. And
Hmm.
yet my story is kind of, a lot. And so people will also say, well, you went through a
Yeah.
lot. Could I still have complex shame? Because I didn't have those, experiences. And my answer is absolutely, you
Hmm.
can.
Well, they're
Complex
shaming
shame
themselves
develops.
in their shame, which is so fascinating. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, wait a minute. I mean, I hear that all the time. Well, I'm not like I didn't have that, or like, well, I wasn't. I'm actually reading this new book, and in it, he was the
Mm.
science of happiness. He talks about
Hmm.
something where he talked about his past, and it was like atrocious, and I found myself doing exactly what you're saying. It's like, oh well, who am I to be upset about this then, because they had it worse. It's like, listeners, that's the shame.
That is the
Yeah,
shame. That is
yeah.
the shame. And that's also why I say, in many ways, my story doesn't matter because you, the listener, your story matters.
Mm.
And that's what I want you to focus on. But sometimes people can resonate with or can understand,
Yeah.
some parts of mine. So I and in my book I talk about all the different types of shame,
Hmm.
but I developed very early growing up a black girl in a white community. We moved from Washington, D.C., which was very diverse, to this little small white farming town in Maryland full of, there were plenty of Mennonites and Amish that I was went to school with, and not the Amish because the Amish went
Right.
to their own school, the Mennonites. And so I developed racial identity issues very early on, just very
Mm.
confused about, the color of my skin and what that meant, because I heard a lot of messages that told me it meant very bad things.
Hmm.
And I also grew up in a fundamental Christian home, and my dad was a prominent doctor in the community, and I became pregnant at 15. And when my parents found out, their response was, this is not happening here. And
Oh.
so they sent me away to a pregnancy home in Virginia, which
Mm.
is about 4 hours away, with the understanding that I would come back without a child. And me being the compliant, already burgeoning codependent girl that I was, I did what my parents wanted. And I gave birth to my daughter in Virginia and medicated, and I left her in the hospital and came back home to pretend like nothing happened. And she was
Mm.
adopted, of course. Um, and
Mm.
so that's where my co complex shame really began to develop. And I went back home to pretend, and I hid in accomplishments. Academically did extremely well. Athletically, I did extremely well. I got a scholarship to UCLA, and I ran and hid in many ways, from
Hmm.
my shame. And I got married very early, as we often do in fundamental Christian
Mm.
communities, because I grew up in the purity
Be the
culture.
good girl.
And yes, yes. And so I did when I was 19, I got married, and I went on to, work and compete. And when I had my first kept daughter, she was born with a very rare genetic disorder.
Mm.
And I, at that time, believed that I was being punished, that she and I were both being punished
I was
for
crying at that
me.
part in your book.
Oh, yes.
Or like
Uh,
Zoe giving birth, and
Poor
yeah.
Zoe. Yeah. And I did, I was just in a cesspool of shame. I believe that we were both being punished for what I
Mm.
had done in placing my daughter for adoption years before. And so that really kind of broke the dam of my shame. And I went through a long process of learning to speak up, of struggling with codependency and complex shame and understanding what it is and seeing it in my patients and working to help them and me and labeling it and all those kinds of things. But I went on my own shame journey, which eventually what's the word?
Culminated.
Culminated,
Yeah.
which eventually culminated and me, telling my family, unfortunately, in my tragic father's death at his funeral.
Mm.
Um, and learning to speak up and heal myself and forgive myself.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's, in a nutshell, more of it is in the book,
Mm.
my story of complex shame
Mm.
and how I came to help myself and others.
Right. And I'm really hearing that forgiveness definition that you have there. Like not it's with that, like it's like the wiser part of
Yeah,
ourselves, like the wiser older part that's like, I get it. Like I get why you did that, and I get why, you felt that, and we
yeah,
didn't have that validation when we were younger. But
right,
I guess
right.
that's part of the healing. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. And it is um, incredibly touching and all the things. And yes, of course, you have the ability to speak to complex shame because you're like, I've
Yes.
done it. So do you notice it coming up now in your relationship, like in your life? And then how do you deal with it now?
That's an excellent question because the answer is yes. I have this 9 step framework for complex shame, and the ninth step is maintenance
Hmm.
because shame is something that runs our society. It always has, and it always will. And because of that, we will always experience shame. The goal is not to never experience shame.
Hmm.
The goal is to learn how to maintain it in such a way that it does not sabotage or rule your life. It does not
Hmm.
cause you to hide. And so shame shows up for me regularly. And when it does, I pause, I identify it. I literally say to myself, oh, I know what that is. That's shame.
Mm-hmm.
And what I am not going to do is what shame asks me to do, which is to hide. Instead, I'm going to speak up. And so when shame comes, I almost imagine that I'm just watching it as if I'm standing by a riverbank and
Mm-hmm.
it's just flowing by. And I watch it come and I watch it pass me and I watch it go and I
Mm-hmm.
speak up.
Mm. Yeah, so listeners, I just want to highlight, she said that's step 9. So we need to get the book. So we
Yeah.
do because that is advanced level and of the processing of shame and allowing it, not running it, not, I mean, shame would love it if you're like, oh, shame is here, shove it back in the secrecy and
Yes.
in the dark. But
Hi.
you're
Don't
like,
let them
no, I'm
know.
just gonna be here and do something differently with it,
Yeah.
which is very helpful. What would you say to the listener who is experiencing, some unhealthy relationship patterns? Or I get in a relationship, say you're in midlife and you are realizing that you have been pretending a bit and just in a protective way, and you're now like getting into more of being yourself, and there are now these patterns in your relationship that aren't so healthy. How do you support women in those?
Yeah. The best advice that I can give is to do the opposite of what shame wants us to do, which is stay quiet and hide, right? And so what that means is that shame demands that we have hard conversations.
Mm,
And it's funny because the longer we are in a relationship, sometimes the more distance we
yes.
experience. We can get to a place where we are literally strangers in
Hmm.
a home, and we would talk more to a stranger than we would to our
Cashier at
partner.
the suit, right? Yeah, like tell them more like I'm having a really hard time, right?
Right. And so the thing that kills intimacy is lack of vulnerability. And
Mm,
when we cease to be vulnerable with our partners, intimacy will fade. And then we think, well, it's just over. We're just gonna be roommates and,
mhm,
so the answer is to have hard conversations. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to sit down and talk for 6 hours and just share everything that you haven't shared in the past 10 years. But what it does mean is that you need to start. You need to start to
mhm,
have a conversation that might look something like, you know, I've changed and grown over these years.
mm,
And there's some things I'm noticing about myself that I want to lean a little bit more into. And it may be kind of uncomfortable in our relationship because I'm not the 25-year-old or whatever, you were with your partner when you got married.
mhm,
And just acknowledging that truth, because to
mm,
be honest with you, many men especially as women come into middle age, there is an awakening, there is a
mhm,
change that happens that's not often the same path that happens with men.
mhm,
And they are blindsided.
mhm,
And I do feel a lot of empathy for men when they come into my
mhm.
office and they're like, what happened to my
What is
wife? She's
going
not
on,
that person
right?
that she was before. And my answer is she's not.
Hmm.
She's not that person anymore. She's not
Hmm.
bad. She's not evil, but she is different. And
Hmm.
how can you accept and honor this new person that she's becoming, right?
Hmm.
But there's often nobody to talk to your partner about that. And so you have to be the one. And so
Hmm.
just by acknowledging things are going to be different, as opposed to just showing up and changing everything with no explanation
Hmm.
and blaming him as if he's the problem. And he might
Yes,
be the problem, but that also is still not helpful, right?
right.
And so when you take accountability that things are gonna be changing and it's
Hmm.
me and it's because I'm changing, and my ask is that you work on accepting this.
Mm,
Sometimes that's an entirely different conversation. And then little by little, you can open up, you can talk, you can change some of the unspoken rules in your marriage when you've acknowledged this instead of just saying, I'm not taking this anymore and
right.
this isn't okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think working with a professional is super helpful because you can have someone who's listening feeling very, very like almost crawling out of their skin. Like they want to be different and, like the hormones are gone. It's like we want to be more authentic or whatever. And sometimes so you have this real desire that is great, but sometimes we then go too big with it and it's more dramatic or we're more, blaming. I see this a lot, like a woman having more needs and then blaming or feeling resentful towards the husband for not somehow magically reading her mind or doing the things that she knows. And
Right.
that's where it can really just sort of catapult on itself. And so I like what you're saying is that just start small. Just say something, just start somewhere and small. It doesn't have to be a 2 day conversation, but a like I've been some sort of vulnerability there. I'm feeling differently. I'm feeling more, like I'm noticing our separation and it's bothering me because I love you
Yeah.
and I always thought like we, journey in our horses off to the sunset. That can meet someone, because the what you're talking about with men, I see also is they're like, wait a minute, like we followed the rule, like we've done that. If you talk about like the typical relationship pattern in a patriarchal society, it's like, no, 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 I've done the thing, I've provided, and now we're almost at the like, let's just be on those horses, lady. And she's like, I think I want a camel. It's like, wait, what?
Like, what happened to you? And for the woman listening, I want to say that you don't have to be small.
Yes.
You should be and get to be all the
Be
bigness
big.
and
Yes.
be big, all of what you are. I'm just asking you to recognize that you need to give your partner a little empathy because he's not
Mhm.
ready for it. And so
Yes.
helping him get used to all of your beautiful bigness is
Yes.
a part of kind of what you should be doing in the relationship.
Well, and I really like that
You're
because
not saying small
especially
anymore.
right, exactly. I know, and it's your other title of the reckon with her, and it's like no, we
Yes,
want you to be big. Like that we want women
exactly.
to show up big, but it is that I often think of codependency like a pendulum, and so on one side we have codependency where we're like hiding ourselves and doing everything for the other person. And in recovery, we often swing all the way to the other side, which is like hyper independent. And it's like, screw you, I'm taking the camel and you. And what we're just asking for here is a little bit of the
Bring it
gray
back
in
to the
between,
middle.
like
Yes.
understanding you've got this man who's with you. So he's obviously invested in the relationship in some way. Like, just considering both, not only considering him, but not also not only considering you.
Right. Yes. I love you talking about the pendulum swing because I often talk about that
Oh,
when,
cool.
when we are in a state of dishealth, and especially when we really want to change things,
Mhm.
we often do that pendulum swing. And
Yes.
the other side of the pendulum is also unhealthy.
Oh,
It's
for
it's
sure.
just as unhealthy as the one side you are on. And so we have to instead bring it back to the middle and say moderation, right? What is healthy? Let's look at
Yeah.
that. Just let me do the opposite.
I call it like on the codependent side, it's like you're a doormat. And then on the other side, it's like your ice queen. I don't need anyone. Like, I don't,
Right.
we just need a little bit in the middle there. And often it can be a nice professional like you that can help
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I think this is a good part to wrap up, but your book is an excellent resource for this.
Thank
Your
you.
podcast, for sure. If they're listening to this podcast, that means they like podcasts. So go search Dr. Zoe Shaw on, I'll put all the links below in the show notes,
Mhm.
but for your podcast. And then your book is just an amazing resource of a deeper dive. You will want a highlighter, order it, get it, and feel supported. What else can we say as we're winding up here? Is there something that you'd like to say in the ear of the woman who's like, oh my God, I have complex shame everywhere?
Yes. When it comes to codependency and complex shame, a lot of people think this is a weakness.
Mm,
And actually, it's born out of strength.
mm,
You're using your strength in the wrong place. You're using your
mhm,
strength in a codependent place to try to control your partner's emotions so that you feel better, right?
mhm.
You're
Right.
using your strength to hide and hold on to burdens that you really shouldn't be carrying.
Mm,
But it's not about weakness, it's about strength. And we can use that same strength to get to freedom. And
mm,
and so I just want to say to women out there who may be feeling like I feel so weak. And my answer is if
mm.
you've got all this stuff going on, it's because you're strong, but you don't need to be holding on to it.
Oh yeah. I'm like, we need some music. Woohoo! Thank you, Dr. Zoe, for coming
You're
on. This is going to
welcome.
help so
Thank
many
you,
people.
Susie.
Yay.
I love everything that you are doing. So thank you for the
Thank
work that
you.
you're
I
doing.
love you. I'm just a big supporter of yours. So yay. Thank you.
Yay.